looking for an effective.
It'll be tasty, right? This is what they put in there.
I prefer charcoalberry thin.
So if I'm pulling volume out now in this closed system, now what kind of negative pressure am I creating? Now I'm creating a huge negative pressure, huge negative pressure, huge negative pressure. All right. Come over here and look at my oxygenator side. See that?
Oh, yeah.
So just deprime my system.
We're never gonna wean him now.
No,
So then if
I mean, that's
you
where-
try
that's
to
where we have
like
to
do the
if it's
clamping,
VA, we're in trouble.
what happens?
We're gonna pump a lot of air.
It's not gonna run. Remember,
So it won't run.
60 to 0.
It deprimed your pump. Yeah.
Zero, running zero.
So if you try to go back on, I'm gonna give you a bunch of air.
That's all right.
So now
At least
you
you
try
can
to
shut
go
down.
back on. I've cleared my alarm, my flow is below limit. Now I try and go up.
It kind of makes a lot of noise, a funny noise.
You know why that's not making any noise? Because I sucked all the air out of that. So I removed all the air. We've got our flow, we've got our.
So there's just a
5,000.
giant air bubble in the motor right now, it's
Yeah,
just
it's just-
spinning air.
yeah.
Air loss.
It is spinning
So-
in air power. It's not gonna go anywhere. If I'd have done less, then what it sounds like is like Rice Krispies sounding,
You can tip some fluid into there.
yeah.
You just like raise the venous return.
Yeah, one thing you can do is you can lower that pump,
Mhm.
but that's clumsy on a situation like this.
You can see the air bubble pop back into the
No,
flow
oxygenator.
cannula.
Yeah. Now you hear it slosh.
So I gave some of that back, but even that, I just removed so much that it's scratched. So.
How are we doing on time? Do you give me like a
5 minutes.
5 minutes or so? Want to talk about weaning a little bit? So VV weaning is actually not that complicated. You know, basically, because you're taking out blood, you're returning it. You know, the big change that you're affecting on the person is in terms of their oxygenation, ventilation, right? And so, if you think they're recovering over time, then you can basically remove your contribution to gas exchange and just see how they do, right? So, you know, signs that they might be improving. We typically sort of wean their FiO2 through the circuit as they recover, and then, you know, if you see that their oxygenation's improving, then you would say, okay, we think this person's ready. Kind of plus up their vent support for a time, let them re-equilibrate, and then we just cap the oxygenator tubing. So I don't know, you want to show them where you cap the tubing or the oxygenator? He's rebuilding everything. And then we'll just watch them for a time, you know, and kind of serial blood gases, and just monitor the patient, make sure they don't have hemodynamic changes, make sure they're not dropping their sats. One thing that, you know, it's probably worth pointing out in patients with ARDS that are, you know, recovering after a respiratory ECMO run, they tend to recover their oxygenation before they recover their ability to clear CO2. And so sometimes you'll see the person, they're ready from an O2 standpoint, but if you see their CO2 climbing, probably wait a little bit longer before you decannulate that person and just support them a bit longer. But can you show them how you would clamp the oxygenator for a VV ECMO?
Oh, absolutely. So what we would do is we would cut our suite off, and then we'd just make sure that we have a clamp on our gas line. And that's the suite gas line.
Now, weaning VA ECMO is a little more complicated. So, you know, one thing we made a point of last time was saying, you know, don't be fooled. In these patients with a low ejection fraction, if you come by and you sonocyte them while they're on full ECMO support, it can make them look worse than they are because they are squeezing against that increased afterload, and so they may actually, you know, they may be better than you would imagine if you. And so you really have to turn them down to try and figure out if they're ready to come off or not. You know, if you see them starting to regain pulsatility, you know, on their, then a lot of times what we'll do is kind of give them a little help with their, from a ventilator standpoint, if they have pulmonary issues, and then give a heparin bolus, and then decrease their flows to a point where you're not getting retrograde flow from the arterial pressure. And on the CardioHelp machine, there's actually a feature, where it'll figure out for you how much flow you need to kind of offset things and hit like a.
It's called zero flow mode.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in zero flow mode on this pump, what you can do is you can hit the S, hold the S down, and then hit the 0, and it will take your RPMs to 0. We'll take your flow to 0, and your RPMs will increase to prevent backflow. And then once you want to come off that, you just hit that button and it'll ramp back up to what it was before. So a cool feature of this type.
And while they're on, while you're on that pause, we'll typically be doing either a transthoracic or a transesophageal echo, kind of looking at what their contractility looks like. Does this look like somebody that this is going to be sustainable? Watch their hemodynamics. If you turn down their ECMO support and their blood pressure drops and they look, then the answer is pretty easy. A lot of times, just to kind of hedge our bets, if we are, really thinking that the person's going to wean, we'll crank up some ionotropes and try and give them a little bit of an advantage. And when they go, and they typically do it in the OR, they'll do a turn down, kind of monitor them, turn down on and then decannulate at that point.
As far as PV, when you're weaning, they were talking in my lectures about extubating like up to 30%. Do you work tracheostomy early into the thing, or just only if they fail? I'm
We
just thinking
tend-
that it would be like do you wait until they're off EV and then they're on conventional ventilator support and then trach, or do you kind of go, well, he's going to recover, but he's not quite there. Let's trach him beforehand so that we'll be able to.
Yeah.
Rather than having to take the.
We tend to try to trach early, while they're recovering, to decrease their need for sedation, facilitate
While they're still on
mobilization, while they're still on ECMO support, so you can rehab the person, you can you can lighten up their sedation, they're more interactive, and then we don't. I think some program like if it would maybe try to wean vent before ECMO. We do it the opposite, where if you can tolerate being on lung protective sort of ARDSNet, 6 cc per kilo with a reasonable PEEP and an FiO2, it's 40% or so. That's when we're thinking that you're ready to wean. You shouldn't have to crank them up, and if you're putting the person on APRV or they're on a 80% FiO2, it's too early and you need to wait longer. And expect the VV ECMO runs for these ARDS patients to be a little bit longer, like a little bit frustrating. A lot of times you're looking at 10, 14 days, sometimes even longer. Some places are reporting these crazy numbers where they're doing 130 days, and I don't know. It's tough. You never know when to say enough is enough. I think, and there's no great tools because there are case reports of patients recovering after these incredibly long